So, a new study last week confirmed that, quote, horrible dating experiences leave 44% of single adults doubting they'll ever meet the one. And that study was actually done in London. However, I feel confident that if it was done here in America, the results would be very similar. There's just no question that modern dating is a mess for a whole host of reasons. But rather than get into the why of all of that, I want to talk to those of you who are single and in a relationship and you're still teetering, or maybe you're not teetering, but you just want to be certain that he or she is the one, about the less obvious issues that will likely come up later that no one talks a lot about. Because I don't want any of you to reach out to me after you've been married with the kinds of problems I'm seeing every week. In fact, I would suggest that you listen to my bonus episodes going forward where I plan to read actual answers to the question, what is your biggest relationship frustration? This is a question on my intake form when people sign up for coaching, and it dawned on me recently that there's a wealth of information at my fingertips from the answers to these questions over the years that I can share with all of you, anonymously, of course, so that you can see the kinds of things married people are struggling with, and often you either don't talk about or you just don't hear about them. So that's what I want to do today. But hey, before I get into that, I know it would mean a lot to people who don't know about this podcast when they're scrolling around their phones or whatever they're doing, in terms of technology. If you've hit the subscribe button and you've left a 5-star review, it pops up in their feed and gets this show in front of more people. I know many of you are as frustrated as I am with the way our culture is headed when it comes to marriage and family, and you feel like you have no recourse. So I'm giving you something you can actually do with those feelings. By subscribing to the show and leaving a review, you're helping to get the word out to other people who need it. So I would appreciate it if you'd pause this episode, for a hot second, write a review, and then come on back. I will be right here when you're done. Okay, back to today's show. So I've been watching 2 series recently. I don't know if you guys have seen these shows. One is called Indian Matchmaking, and the other is called Love is Blind. And I think they've been around for definitely over a year. I just recently watched both in the last, say, 6 months or so. And I just want to say this about these shows because I know they're scripted, right? And I know it's for entertainment, but I still think there's a lot to be gleaned, even though that's true. I mean, you're not going to see things the same way you would, say, 30, 40 years ago. The process would be different. So I'm really interested in with both of these shows specifically, they are doing something that I think people should be doing today with dating. And I think they're going to have to do going forward if people are going to continue to get together and make babies and have families and get married. They're honing in on the important things that they need to know about the other person right away and trying to focus less on that chemistry piece. That's the idea behind it. So they're kind of like the arranged marriage concept with both of these shows. Now, with the Indian matchmaking, it really is flat out, Indian matchmaking. It's the parents are involved. It's much more intense and done a little differently than Love is Blind, where if you haven't seen Love is Blind, it's 2 people who come together in these pods and there's a wall between them and they can't see each other. And the idea is that for X amount of weeks, you're answering all these questions about the other person to see if there's some compatibility there. And you're getting to the heart of, the important things right away, rather than an actual dating process where you're falling in love or not, falling into bed, usually, and then trying to sort of create a relationship from that, which is okay. So I love the idea of the whole thing because it's so businesslike and it gets the job done. The thing with the Love is Blind that I don't like is I think it's completely unrealistic to not see a person visually and think you're going to have a relationship and whether or not you're attracted to them, as though that doesn't matter, because that's just silly. You have to be attracted to the person. So you could have had this quote unquote connection with them through these pods, and this has actually happened. And then you see them, and of course, you're not physically attracted. There's no chemistry there. So then there's nowhere for that to go, but it gets drawn out over the weeks, and it's just a silly concept in terms of that, in terms of the not seeing the person. But I like the concept of, checking the boxes. Hey, is this what you want? Is this what you want? Is this what you want? Right away. And they also meet each other's families a few weeks in, and they do all this stuff in sort of a rushed form, which I think is good. I think is good because then you're not wasting time finding that out later when you're completely embroiled in this very intense sexual relationship with somebody. So again, it's just not seeing the person, I think, is silly, which is why I liked the Indian matchmaking better, because you look at the picture of the person and you decide based on what's on a piece of paper, including their picture, whether or not it's a potential match. So anyway, I just wanted to open with that and highly recommend them because they're very entertaining, I have to say. I also have 2 young adult children, a son and a daughter, who have each now been in a 2-year relationship. One of whom is older and much closer to potentially getting married than the other one, I hope. I mean, I hope for the younger one that's not on the radar yet. They're still in school. So this is personal to me. The older one is going through it. And it's gotten to the point now where, once you've come out of school and enough time has passed and you're getting involved in your careers, you invariably are going to have decisions to make that are almost always about geography. And we're going to come back to that later. So it forces you to make a decision. Really. It's just going to do that eventually. So this episode is as much for my own kids as it is maybe for your kids if you're my age and have kids my age, or if you are 20 or 30 something who is in a relationship and trying to make this decision. As somebody who has now been married for a quarter of a century, and as many of you know, was married before in my 20s, several years, no kids. There is one thing I know for sure, and I try to stress it as much as I can, and that is that love is absolutely, unquestionably not enough. It's just not enough. And it's not a pretty thing to hear, and we all like to, think the rom-coms is the way life should be, but that's just not realistic. Obviously, you need to love the person you marry. I mean, presumably most people do. I don't think anybody stands up at an altar, not loving the person in some capacity or thinking or feeling that they do. That would be kind of weird, or unusual rather. But it's just not enough, hence these shows that I was talking about that, we know that there has to be more there. So while we can't predict everything, we can't get 100% guarantee ever, there are some basics that need to be in place that I don't think get enough attention. I mean, we have the obvious things, but not so much the details of these other things that come up. And if you're someone who wants to be married for 50 years and not 5, and I will assume that most people who get married fall into that boat. Nobody wants to get divorced. There are 2 main things you must be in agreement on if you expect to go the distance or want to go the distance. And then I'm going to mention those 2 things, and then I'm going to get into the weeds on some details. But I just wanted to mention these 2 big things, like to the point where if you're not, just move on, because it's just not going to work out. The first one is that you agree that you need to be a team once you get married. And this team mentality is in every aspect of your life, which is very countercultural because we focus so much on the individual today. We hone in on that. We pride ourselves on being our own person. We don't need anybody. We're an individual, we're equals or whatever, as though being a team with someone is going to take away a part of you. It's just not true. I don't know how else to say it. It's just not true. The couples who are the most successful think alike on this one thing, that they are a team. So, and it can show up in a small way. Are you going to carry your bag or my bag, or are those just the bags that need to be carried to the car kind of thing? Or in the biggest way of all, and that's financially. Actually, I shouldn't say the biggest. There's two biggest: financially and parenting, both of those. In both of those areas, finances and parenting, the people who are the most successful have a team mentality. What's yours is mine, what's mine is yours. For richer, for poorer. To all unto thee, although my worldly, I'm not going to say that right. I haven't heard it in so long. Certainly they're not in modern day marriage vows, so I'm going to butcher it. But unto thee all my worldly goods I give. I think that's right. And the moment you start thinking yours and mine is the moment you're going to have what appears to be peace. A lot of people think, well, it's easier that way. So they think that their marriage is stronger somehow because they have separate accounts or separate whatever. But invariably, because you're married, a big decision, many big decisions is going to have to be made, and that's going to require you to confront your money situation. So you can't really just live like a roommate peacefully. It's just not going to work. And I'm not going to spend a whole episode on this because I have a money and marriage series I'm doing, and I'll get into the weeds on that. But all I'm trying to say for this, the purpose of today is being a team in every way. Financially, parenting is huge. Children will feed off of one or the other. If you're not on the same team, they smell it if you're not on the same team, and they'll play you off of each other. As well as even the other person's problems. And that's a really hard one, I think, for people. If one person has a problem in the marriage, then you both have a problem. And that can be really challenging because it's very easy to get resentful about the other person's problem, because the other person's problem becomes your problem. So you're marrying that. You're marrying the whole person and all of the issues / problems he or she brings to the table, and it becomes our problem. These are the types of struggles that I see every week in my coaching business. When you're not a team in these areas, that's where conflict starts to occur and the breakdown occurs. It doesn't mean you'll necessarily get divorced, but you can stay married to somebody and still not be happy or successful or have a strong marriage. So however that manifests itself, it's almost always because they're no longer on a team. That's number one. And then the second one, this is so huge. I never hear anybody talking about it. Your choice of lifestyle, which is really a values question. Because you're saying, what kind of life do you want to live? What do you want it to look like on a day-to-day basis? What's going to be prioritized? You wake up and you do what? And at the end of the day, it looks like this. And then Saturday comes along and it's like this. Now, you're not going to get into the weeds of that, I'm sure. Like, how's Monday going to look compared to Saturday? I'm being a little flip about it. My point is just, you've got to know what kind of lifestyle you want. There's no right or, and we're going to get into this in a few minutes. There's no right or wrong to it. They just have to match. So like Bill and I have plenty of friends whose lifestyles, very close friends who we love dearly, whose lifestyles are in no way similar to ours. But that doesn't mean one of our marriages is stronger than the other. It doesn't matter what they look like. It just matters that the two people who are married agree. Right? So I'm a homebody, for example. So somebody who, my ex-husband was definitely not a homebody. He needed a lot of excitement and movement and not sitting still and playing hard and working hard and all of that, traveling a lot. Nothing wrong with it. It's just not the life I wanted. So it's not a coincidence that we're not together today. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So those are the two things, sort of overarching things that are crucial to address and figure out whether or not you're in agreement on those in those two ways. There's still a lot more, but those are the two like no-brainers. Okay, so let's get a little more detailed here. And some of these will have something to do with those two things and some of them won't. If you marry somebody whose view of marriage isn't the same as yours, somebody who, for example, is a product of divorce and you're not, let's say. If this isn't always the case, it's not the case with my husband because he had opposite. He went the other way. But there's a lot of people who are products of divorce who, because they saw that modeled, it tends to get into their brain and become a fallback option for them. I mean, it's a fact. It's not my opinion that divorce begets divorce. The more you have people who are products of divorce tend to go on to be products of divorce themselves. That's what I'm trying to say, or create their children and get divorced themselves. And it just has to do with what feels more like an option, I guess is a better way of putting it. Religion tends to take that away. If you're a very religious person and you believe in marriage from that end, then even if you're a product of divorce, I'm certainly not saying that everybody who's a product of divorce is going to follow in that same path. I'm just saying it very often happens. And with the decline of religion happening, that's probably even a greater reason why it would. You might have also had a mother, I say mother here because usually it's mothers and not fathers who do this, who was unsuccessful in love, honestly, whether she divorced or not, but feels, is unhappy or feels unsuccessful in that department and has a very negative view of marriage as a result, or of men, and pass that on to you. I see that a lot with my coaching clients. I'm like, I have yet to, I think, to really think of somebody who I've talked to whose mother was, pro men, pro marriage, or helpful in that regard. If anything, it was very 60s boomery, divorce is okay. Don't give up your career for a man. Just all those messages that came in the latter part of the 20th century, and these are the children of those people who really have no support in this department that someone like myself would have, for example, who was raised by a different mindset, different parents with a different mindset about marriage. So there's all kinds of stories out there, but at the end of the day, if you really have a heads up, basically, if you both had parents who were married for a long time or are still married. Unless those marriages are horrible, then that's, I guess, not good. But just being together is very helpful. Let's just put it that way. But most importantly is what your view is. I wouldn't tell somebody don't marry somebody just because they're a product of divorce, obviously, because I did. But it's all about what that person wants for themselves and what their view is. And if you guys match on that, wow, that's really, really strong. That can be a glue. Okay, now I feel silly going to this next thing that's just completely less significant than that one. You're going to laugh. A partier versus a non-partier. This kind of goes back to what I was saying before about my being a homebody. That's basically what I mean. Are you somebody who wants to be out in the world a lot, socializing, going to events, playing a lot of golf, going to parties, or are you more of an at-home person? And again, you don't hear a lot about this, but it's a big deal. It's a super big deal. I mean, it might not seem like that at first, especially when you're in the stage of life where you both might be similar now, but over a long life, you're gonna, life's gonna change and your circumstances are gonna change. So you can't necessarily always know how you're going to react to them. That's true, but in general, you kind of know whether you're more of a simple, uh, homebody type or whether you need constant stimulation. So that's going to be a big deal for people. I'm not sure if partier versus non-partier was the right way to phrase it. So that's why I'm trying to expound upon it a little bit more. Just how much you want to be social versus not. I guess that's the best way of putting it. Okay, another huge one, probably the hugest that I'm seeing myself with people is the work family plan. What is going to be the plan for balancing work and family? I hate that word balance, but I don't know how else to say it. It's really the roles and the responsibilities that I'm referring to. And that will go back to what I said above, one of the two things being the choice of lifestyle. That's very much related to that. If one person has this image of two people working and employing childcare versus one person being at home and one person being at work, you need to know that before you get married. And you would be surprised at how many people I meet who did not have this discussion. I'm just blown away. I cannot understand it. It's so basic and it's so but I do think it's because no one's telling them that they need to work this out, and they're assuming that the way they're living then is the way they're always going to live. And they don't have a lot of models for, I mean, I guess they'll go with whatever their modeling was unless you specifically don't, share that model and you want to do something different, which happens a lot. But you have to agree on what that whole work and family, the roles and responsibilities is going to be and generally look like. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of compromise over the years that you can't really figure out until you get there. But in terms of the basic structure, later is not the time to figure that out. It's significantly harder, especially as it pertains to your finances. Because, for instance, if you know that one person's going to be not working for X amount of years in advance, you wouldn't, for example, buy a house with two incomes, with the expectation of two incomes. Even if you both have two incomes, if you have two incomes prior to having children, don't buy a house with the expectation that that's going to continue. Do the exact opposite. Buy a house that you can afford on the one income and save and pocket that other money so that you can reach your goal of one person being at home for X amount of years. That's just an example. In a larger, more, I don't know, spiritual is not the right word, but like, I don't know what the word is, but a different way of looking at this is what you want the climate in your home to be like. When you have two people working full time and year round from day one for decades, which, well, let's just go with that for a minute. Your house is going to feel very different than when you have somebody actually in it at home. Those are two very different climates. For example, I know plenty of people, I'm sure you do too, we all do, who have beautiful kitchens, but nobody's actually cooking in them. They're more just social spaces to gather. Now, if you want that sort of thing, and you're married to somebody who wants that sort of thing, it's going to work out. If you have a different vision of what you want, like you actually want to be cooking and having those smells emanating from the kitchen and have people in the house creating a home, not people, have a person in there creating a home. That's a different vision for your future those two things do not have anything in common. They're two totally different lifestyles. So it's not just the responsibility and the roles per se, but the climate of the home and what you want to wake up to every day. And do you want chaos and people running in different directions? Or do you want more of a home, which is really what you create when one person, usually the mom, is there in it? And this will be really important for how you were raised too, because you might want to copy what your parents did. You might want to do the opposite. Again, doesn't matter as long as you both are on the same page about it. Okay. Views on God and religion. I think I've covered this before, but again, that comes up a lot. If you don't have to be the same religion as someone, but you are going to struggle if you're a believer and you marry somebody who is not. That is definitely going to cause a problem, because you're going to have children and you're not going to know how to raise them because you're not on the same team. You're not on the same. See how they all lead back to this lifestyle or team thing, much of it. That's why I picked those two at the beginning, because these are the details of those two larger issues. You're going to, when the child comes to you, you you don't want to give completely different answers. Well, yes, there's a God. Well, no, there isn't. That's a problem. That's not the same as one person being of one faith and the other of another, just as long as, or somebody not having a faith and the other one having a faith that's really strong. As long as there's a leader and you're in agreement on who's going to, lead on that front. That's really important. Okay, and now money. Money is huge, obviously. Money and parenting, as I said earlier, are the biggest. So for money, and parenting is very hard because it's very hard to figure that out until you're actually doing it. So there is some of that. But money, well, the thing with money is that I know that the most common issue with it today with the younger generation is this roommate mentality. That's your money, this is my money, and we're just going to live like parallel lives. You have yours and I have mine. And I'm telling you, even if you both agree on that, that's going to cause you a problem, because, as I said, it's going to create conflict when decisions need to get made on big things. And B, you're never going to have the intimacy that the conversations, you're never going to have the intimacy of the conversations, the inevitable conversations that occur when you're forced to deal with your money together. And a lot of this will have to do, this is where you really study. And I've talked about this in past podcast episodes, but it's going to come up again and again because it's a big deal. What your relationship is with money, what you glean from your parents, what you want to do similarly or differently, again, doesn't matter as long as you mostly agree on that. Although I would not suggest that you agree on being like roommates, because I see the effect of that every week, and it is bad. It's just not good. And I don't think anybody's talking about that, because when I hear from people, or when I hear other people calling in to other shows and talking about it, they got no instruction on this, no direction, no help. So they had no way of knowing, because all they ever hear from the culture is mine, 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 yours, 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 independence, independence, individual, individual. There's just no talk of marriage as a team effort in the more conventional sense, and why that is, why that makes for a much stronger union. And I don't want you, to call me. Like I said, that's why I'm doing this, to share with you about what I'm seeing. And this is hands down the biggest thing I'm seeing. When you get together on your money, when you're married, everything else falls into place. It's that significant. As long as you're not dealing with your own issues with money and marrying those issues with your spouses and confronting it every week or month, or just regularly, let's just say consistently, no matter how hard the conversations are, and then getting through to the other side. No, let's just put it this way. Nothing will strengthen your marriage faster than doing that. So if you're not doing that, you're basically just avoiding it. Which leads into the other thing I was going to say, which is the willingness to have hard conversations or to face conflict, to be self-reflective, open to help, those types of things. You want to both be in that same mindset, for sure. And then here's another really big one. Your ability to set boundaries with your family of origin, meaning that the family you're going to create comes first. I feel very fortunate in this regard. I don't think our kids will have any problem with that with us. We totally respect those boundaries. We never want to overstep. I think that's the case with both of um, the families of the significant others, let's say that. Let's put it that way, that our children have. I don't foresee dealing with that a lot, but I see that a lot. And it's bad. It will really, really hurt your marriage if one person is more puts their family of origin before their spouse. Let's put it that way. Does not stand up for their spouse to their family of origin if they have something to contend with. That the spouse does not feel like he or she comes before the family of origin. That could be a sibling or a mother or a father. Usually it's the mother. That's a problem. In fact, the 4 areas of marriage that, if you are aligned, show that you will have a very high success rate are money, parenting, religion, and then the last one is in-laws. Meaning, and that's what it has to do with, is whether you are willing to put in that boundary there and say, this is my family, we come first, and not let those other people in a way that is destructive to your own relationship. Okay, and then here is this last one is I never hear anybody talking about this, but it is really big. It is a really big deal. What you like to do on vacation. Like, what does going on vacation mean to you? Are you somebody who wants to go to the beach, you can't get it too hot, and just lay there all day and be happy soaking up the sun, doing absolutely nothing? I have some friends who like to do that. It sounds like hell to me. It's like, it's awful for me. I'd rather go where it's cold, and I'd rather be moving. But some people, especially if you're a moving type on a constant basis, need to just veg. And there's no right or wrong here again. But if you do not match with temperatures and what you're going to do on those vacations, it may sound like a small thing relative to these other things. And I guess it is, because it depends on how often you're going to go on vacation. Presumably if you're only doing something once or twice a year, it doesn't seem like a deal breaker. And I'm certainly not suggesting that it is, but I would say that it's just something to be aware of, because it can actually cause people a lot of problems. And, invariably you just have to compromise on it. But there's just a lot of details to vacationing that I think are really interesting, and that will definitely come up as you go through the years. So, it's something to have a conversation about. Let's put it that way. Okay, so now I just want to mention just a few things separate for women than for men. Things that I have seen, that I am seeing. So I'm just going to pass it on to you and tell you, here's generally what I'm seeing that men are dealing with and that women are dealing with when it comes to, deciding whether or not this person is the one. And sometimes it just seems like it should be so much more obvious than it is, but for some reason it's not. And I think a lot of that has to do with just being so far in that you can't really see very clearly. So you just need to talk it through with someone. That's why the earlier you determine this stuff, there are so many things you can determine, which is, again, why I opened it with this Indian matchmaking and the Love is Blind, because if you get these things out of the way right away before you've slept with the person or gotten too far in, you just move on to the next one and you save all this time. And that's what I think is needed for today's dating life. People are doing this completely backwards. They're getting way in too fast before they determine these things. And then they're trying to figure it out after the fact and it's not working. So just reverse that. So here's, for example, for women, and I'm hearing this a lot, and you are too. I know you are. Does he know where he's going and how he's going to get there? Right? This person that you want to marry potentially, or that you're dating. Is he a man with a plan? Does he have a purpose? And I want to say the most obvious thing, which is he employed? But I don't even just mean employed. I mean, does he have a purpose and a plan and know where he's going? You don't want to get with a man who's still trying to figure it out, because it's not, you're going to waste your time in hoping for something that isn't necessarily going to come. And number two, he's not going to be his best person or best self until he has figured it out. It's very important that and for him, that's going to be professionally, more so than for women. So this is something you hear about with women all the time, is that they know exactly where they're going, but they're dating men who don't. And they're holding on and wondering if what they're feeling in not, in being concerned about that should be a concern. And the short answer is yes, it should be a concern. Don't get with a man who isn't on his path, who hasn't figured it out. Move on to the next one and wait for the guy who has. And if you can't find them, then you're going to be waiting a while, because you're wasting your time with a guy who doesn't know himself yet. He's not grown yet, and that can happen at 25 or 35. It kind of depends on the person. Yeah, so that's a big one that I see with women. Another one is whether or not he spends an inordinate amount of time on video games, or if he harbors resentment toward women as a group. Those are things to steer very clear of. Computers are part of life. People are going to be on them. But if he is obsessed with video games, for example, and playing them a lot, I don't think that's such a turn on. I don't know. I just think, I don't know. Not that I'm against video games per se, but I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience with it. My husband's never played. I've never seen him play a video game, and I don't know any men who do. So, but we're older. But again, use your judgment. I mean, obviously, if it's taken over, it's a problem, and you also could be spending that time doing something more productive. So that would raise a flag. And then, is he a genuinely kind person or a controlling person? That's something to watch out for. So those are the things that I see mostly with women who are dating and still trying to figure out whether a person is, marriage material, so to speak. I think it's men who get a lot less guidance when it comes to this, and that's really unfortunate. And it's, I believe, because we're not allowed to say anything negative about women. Women are always great, and you should just love what you get and not have to ever hear anything negative about women if you're a guy. And that's crazy. We are the same. We are both, can't believe I just said that. We are the same with respect to our abilities to be less than ideal. Let's put it that way. I'm choosing my words carefully here. So for men, if you're looking for somebody who's wife material, you want somebody who's substantive, not silly. I don't need to tell you that, though. You know this. I'm always saying that men know the silly girls from the serious ones. So if you've found somebody and you're considering marrying her, it would be almost odd if you, I don't know. I just think that it's rare for a guy, I think, to actually want to marry an unserious or a silly girl. But I guess, it happens. More specifically, though, is she supportive and kind as opposed to self-centered or petty? These are things you need to watch out for before you get so far in that you are considering marrying her. Is she down to earth with good values? Is she addicted to social media? That's going to be a big one today. Just like with the guys with the video games, is she addicted to social media? Can she not, use her time wisely? Or is she, basically if she's addicted to social media, and I know a lot of women are, and that's going to be a problem for you later. I mean, I'm constantly hearing it from men. Well, I can't get her attention because she's always on her phone. Again, that's a whole nother episode of itself that we need to address, is social media, but something to watch out for. And then, does she too harbor resentment toward men as a group? Just like I said about men harboring resentment toward women as a group. If somebody that you're marrying has those thoughts in his or her head, it's going to come back to bite you. That's going to be a problem when you're married. So those are just I just wanted to throw those things out there of things I'm seeing that are very distinctive for the men versus the women, as opposed to the stuff before was for both sexes. I just wanted to get that in there. So that's it. That's all I've got for today. And I hope that is helpful. Like I said, I'm going to be doing bonus episodes going forward to answer that question. What is your biggest relationship frustration? So that you can hear from already married people about what they are dealing with 5, 10, 15 years down the line. I think that is extremely helpful. Anything you can do early on and get on top of is going to be hugely helpful for you in your own personal happiness as well as in the peace of your marriage.